Testing. End of a Species is live. Live, recorded. But like live right now.
It's still recorded. No one's listening to us right now except each other and, and your dogs.
Yeah, so I'm live to me. Yeah, I'll go with that. We're live to me. But recorded to all of you guys. How's it going? Welcome back to the End of a Species podcast. And or YouTube if we're doing like little clips for you guys to see the best of, or
you could also just post the whole thing. They're good about that now. I think the metric is like an hour.
Word. We're about to talk for like 7 hours right now, and you guys are going to enjoy it because that's how we roll. But today we wanted to kind of talk about a hobby that we have. As far as something that we've been doing for about a year, close to a year.
About a year. Our first game wasn't until like January of this year, but like we're coming up on 10 months, so
I'll take it. Yeah, so for close to a year, we've been doing some D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. Going through quests
and
killing
bad guys,
rolling d20s,
and others. There's like 7 different dice to
cursing each other out when it lands on a 1.
Well, you have no one to blame but the gods at that point.
Or that Adam has this shirt that he wears that literally has a d20 landing on a 1,
but it's a joke.
I blame it on the shirt. But we wanted to kind of go over. The D&D has made a resurgence in the last couple years.
It's huge now.
Yeah, it's this phenomenon. If you do not play D&D, then I don't know, something's wrong with you. But because of this tremendous resurgence, this rise in popularity, there are shows like Critical Role that you're really into.
That's where I first picked it up. Well, I first picked it up on like a special that some people from it did, but like it was actually sponsored by World of Warcraft, by Blizzard Entertainment, when they had their release of their last expansion. And what was his name? I can't remember.
I think it's safe to say that all RPGs are kind of gateway drugs back to D&D, and D&D kind of leads to all RPGs in some way.
Well, I mean, I think I've shown you some of the artwork and styles and like attacks and negative effects. Like everyone steals from Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So like I can't remember what it was in Final Fantasy, but like you mentioned is like, oh, it's this thing. It does an attack called Bad Breath, and it gives you
the Marlboro.
Ailments. Yeah. And then I was like, oh, you mean does it look kind of like this? And I show you a beholder, and it does like petrification, poison, like disintegration, all this stuff. And it's like, oh, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah. So it's safe to say that
you just call it something different for copyright reasons.
Yeah, sure. Although I get the sense that Wizards of the Coast is not very litigious when it comes to that thing. Like they want more people doing something related to, because it'll lead back to, maybe, I don't know.
Well, they're probably not propagated. Well, there was a whole thing because I can't remember what the specifics was, but like they're not allowed to use the word hobbit. Like Dungeons and Dragons is not allowed to use the word hobbit, even though they have a race called a halfling, which is also used in Lord of the Rings, but the Tolkien estate has dibs on the word hobbit. So they actually had to call them something else, even though, like, I think in first edition they actually called them hobbits. And then they got sued over it. So like, there's a whole thing about it. But like, everyone kind of steals from everyone else. But you have some main staples, but like, a lot of people steal a lot of stuff from Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, and which is also a subsidiary of Hasbro. So
it's like Slick Rick lines. Every time you listen to rap music, you come across a Slick Rick line or a Biggie line. But you actually got me into it. You got me into World of Warcraft first, so I played that for a little bit. I want to say like
3 months,
a few months, yeah. And so then you were researching Dungeons and Dragons. You told me about it. We got together a campaign. You're our DM, which you do, in my opinion, an awesome job.
I do all right.
And
I'm still looking up stuff at the table. Like, how does this? Or I'm like, I don't know how that works. Let me find out. Like,
Well-
what do you mean fall damage? And I'm like, oh, it's like, I don't know. How much does that weigh?
well,
So-
to be fair, I've seen that. Like I've seen experienced DMs do that. Like when I'm watching them. But I think that's kind of the point of what we want to talk about is that it can be kind of even though
It's daunting.
yeah.
Like I originally, when I was talking to my wife about starting this up, and she was like, "Whatever you want to do, be nice about stuff, and I'll support you in whatever you want to do, sweetie," kind of a thing. And I was like, "All right, well, that's just the generic wife answer." She's kind of rolling her eyes and doesn't really care. But like she's now playing with us, and talking to her about stuff that happens like at the table, like she'll get into it. She'll be like,
Oh,
"I
yeah.
can't believe the way he acted," and whatever. And, so. But there's a lot to it, and a lot of people don't know where to start or whatever, and they've seen stuff happening, and like getting into it there's just so much. There's books, there's versions, like you have third edition Pathfinder, fifth edition. Then there's like different ones based on like this one's in space and this one's in. I mean, like they're not all the same. Coming from Wizards of the Coast, but like they're all built on similar rules and sets of stuff.
I think even though this version, from what I understand, is the easiest one to get into, the barrier to entry is still a little intimidating when you see people that know exactly what they're doing, how they're doing it. They're very confident about the storyline, where they want their campaign to go. People jump in with a character and they're like, "My character does this," and they're okay, win, lose, or draw, to carry that character to whatever it does. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how you, as a muggle, an uninitiated, am I going to get sued?
A non-magic person.
J.K. Rowling, don't sue me. But a non currently playing D&D person to jump into D&D and kind of have fun, right? And I think the first thing that you need is a DM that's into it, that's willing to make. I mean, you said it's daunting. For me, it's as daunting as the task that you give me to do. Like, hey, I need a backstory for this thing, or I need you to tell me the color that you want this to, or what do you want to use for. You just leveled up and you got this spell, and it gives you this character. What do you want that to be? But for you, it's a completely different story. Like,
well, I've taken the long, difficult road, the one that's I would say it's probably the preferred travel method, but like also it's the more expensive and time consuming method, which is like I'm doing maps and miniatures and painting and learning rules, and I'm learning rules for all you, and I'm writing a completely almost from scratch storyline. Like I'm using a lot of stuff from another media, but like I'm building a lot of concepts and characters and how everything's interacting, and trying to go through timelines of like, you guys are doing this thing, but other people are out doing other stuff to kind of like battle against you, and trying to keep days in check and whatever. And like that's a more difficult way to go, but like I dove head first into it. Mm-hmm. The easier way to do is to like, first off, theater the mind, like having to like miniatures and maps and like physical representations are nice, and they're fun, but like you don't need any of that shit.
Yeah.
Like you can go through and play the entire thing like just describing persons and places and locations or whatever, and just it's all in your head.
I think the first few sessions we had like, things that kind of looked like the thing we wanted it to look like. And
right.
Now we have whole almost Hollywood set pieces.
Well, that I don't know about Hollywood set pieces, but I have watched probably I would probably say 60 plus hours of how to paint miniatures and terrain and how to build stuff and so on and so forth, going and bought things to build. Like I have a whole set of things that I want to do once I get past like a certain number of miniatures that I've got sitting on my work table to get painted, and then once I get into that, then we're getting into like that's when you're going to start seeing the maps and stuff scale up with like trees and like the ground rises and falls and like like this is on a hill and you can tell it's on a hill because it's slanted and like a whole nine. So like
It's October 20th, and you just messaged me a picture of Santa Claus.
well, I know I've got a long time because I'm writing a Christmas specific Dungeons and Dragons campaign, but the idea behind that is that people come into town and hang out and whatever, and like people are always looking for something to do, and instead of sitting around watching damn TV, something, Charlie Brown's Christmas, I'm like, how about we play a game? I'm like, oh yeah, let's play a game. And I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna have a storyline set up. We'll play the same story every Christmas. I can just lock it away in a box and be like, this is the Christmas box for Dungeons and Dragons. And then like I'm gonna have like 6 character sheets for like everyone gets to pick. You don't make a character, you don't have to go through the whole process, but you'll have a character sheet, and then like I'll have a miniature for you, and like you'll have a map and stuff, and like everyone can kind of sit and play, and hopefully it's a game that takes 2.5 to 3 hours, and then everyone can be like, oh, that was great, and then or they'll say, wow, that was really dumb and boring, and then they don't have to come back though. So
Well, to bring it back, that kind of tells you, like, if you have a DM that's really into it and that wants to make the commitment to make it a fun game, research everything, and just the DM makes the world either enjoyable or boring. So,
well, I would counter that because like I've built a world, like I've built a sandbox for everyone to come play in, and then like the people that come play in it, if they like, they can make it as much as that they want. Like, but depending on like, it's kind of easier for you guys in the story that you're playing because I've kind of let you run free and do whatever you want to do.
Exactly.
Like I've set stuff up that like no matter where you go, you're gonna find something to do, but also, if I set this, set of goals in front of you that people are asking you to do and tasks that people are asking you to accomplish, and you were like, to hell with this, I'm out. Like, we're going west or east or north, south, whatever, and like, this place can burn. We don't give a shit. You're out. Then that's a completely different thing, and that's your prerogative if you want to do that, but hopefully I've given enough incentive to everyone involved that they want to keep going on the path that they want. And also I feel that, it'll be a lot harder on me if everyone just like picked a direction and was like, nope, that's where we're going. Like, whatever your story is, bye. But anyway, getting back to like getting into it, you have to make the choice. Like I made the choice of like, I wanted to play, and I wanted to play with my friends, and I was the one that knew the most about it, so I took the reins of being the dungeon master to kind of like run everything and teach people rules and keep track of everything and doing all the heavy lifting. But like if you want to just play, like you have to find a game shop, or well, there's also other media. There's virtual tabletops that you can go to and find people on there that are looking to play, and other things. But like you have
just
to
on
kind
a
of like,
side note, I heard you say game shop, and it is incumbent on me to say that this episode is brought to you by
fuck GameStop.
Fuck GameStop. Sorry about that. Anyway,
But which is not a purveyor of fine Dungeons and Dragons or other tabletop RPG systems.
there you go.
But yeah, there's a game shop that's not in our town, but it's like the next town up. And we come across, I go to that one, and like they've got a bulletin board of like people looking for games. Like, look, I'm looking to run this and talk to these people and do this kind of thing with this version of Dungeons and Dragons or Starfinder or whatever. And I want to meet every Wednesday or Thursday between 6 and 7, and play for like 2 hours. This is my email address. Let me know. And people are looking to play because playing is, meeting new people and playing is fun, and you might develop some good relationships off of those people.
Yeah. If you find a game that's already set, that's probably kind of like, especially if it's a good game, that's kind of like hitting the lotto. Because I mean, for me, all told, I've spent less than $100
Yeah.
jumping. I mean, aside from like food and stuff, but like on actual stuff to play D&D, it's been less than $100.
Well, it's like a set of dice, like a box to carry your dice and miniature in, and then like a character sheet, which I think you get free off the internet. And I think you bought the starter deck,
Yeah,
the starter box or whatever, but I don't think you've touched it.
no.
No. So.
And I did buy like the spell cards,
Oh yeah, the spell
but
cards. Yeah.
all together. I mean, all together, it's not a lot. But
What you've listed as is probably like $50 maybe.
if that, and
And you don't even need that much to get into it. Like you really need like I would usually suggest people pick up the manual, the player's handbook, which is, I mean, if you buy it, support your local game shop. But like if you buy it from them, it's like $40 to $50. But if you buy it on like Amazon, then it's like 25. It's like half almost. But like I would usually say like the player's handbook and a set of dice, and then like you need like paper, and then like that's like it, because like depending on how busy and difficult and complex your game is, like you need to take notes. But like just everyone.
and if you don't want to use paper, grab your phone, open the notes app, and start writing crap. Like
Everyone has a phone,
it.
unless you're Amish. But then you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons either, because that's the devil.
Yeah, but suffice it to say, on the DM side, it's a lot of work. On the player side, it's as much work as you want it to be, right? But a DM can make a really fun world, or can make a really boring world. But it's not gonna be fun unless you make it fun. So you go in, let yourself go. It's role playing. And
You are not yourself. Don't go in as yourself. Go in as whoever, Trothak, the shark puncher.
Yeah.
And like that's the guy you are.
And I'm going to give you an example. Like, I don't drink. Barely. If, like, the minimum. Social drinking is a lot for me. But the character I play in our campaign is a lush. And has gone through trials and tribulations with that. Like, so sometimes my character drinks a lot. Sometimes he doesn't. And sometimes he acts accordingly because of his drinking or lack thereof. And I get to be that person. So I play a hill dwarf that's also a light cleric, and has had stuff happen in his backstory that affects the current story. And it's fun to have that happen. It's fun to be thinking through, what would my character do in this situation? Not what me, Jeff, would do. What would my character be doing when faced with this, given the backstory that I have? And you can kind of do stuff. It's different from like picking up Witcher and saying, well, I'm going to do my side quests in this order because that's the best way for me to finish the game faster, or however you want to play it.
Right.
This is actually like, you can pretty much do what you want as long as your DM allows it. And
a good DM will. I would say this because of people that I've talked to and people that I've watched play, and then people that I've seen play online and whatever. A good DM will say, yes, but for something crazy or wacky or whatever that you want to do. But they won't limit your imagination. Like, if what they're asking to do, unless it breaks a rule or they're using something that's like I want to cast this spell to make this thing, explode into a million pieces and then like send out like shards and kill everyone. And I'm like, well, that's not what that spell is intended to do. But like, maybe I can, work with you of like, well, if you go up a spell slot and then cast that and then do it that way, we'll roll to see what happens and how much damage it does. Like you say, you give a caveat to a lot of stuff because
the DM allows you to do anything you want, and only puts the limits of like the physics of the world. Like just like in real life, if I wanted to climb up the side of my house without a ladder and land on the roof like Spider-Man, the physics are going to tell me, well,
Yeah.
are you agile enough to do that? And if
Yeah.
you're not, then what's going to happen? And that's similar to that in that, like, hey, I'd like to jump over this dude and land on his back and kick him in the back of the head. Okay, well, roll a something check. Or
usually like an that would be like an acrobatics.
and or whatever. And if you can do it, then well, there you go.
Yeah.
And your stats will also limit you based on that. So it's in depth, but it's in depth, but it's simple at the same time, which I think most really good systems are.
Well, that's the thing is the system is set up to allow a lot of different things to happen. They have a lot of ground rules for things, and then based on what you're asking, you can do basically whatever you want. Like now, some people are like, "Well, I want to jump over the house," and I'm like, "Well, you're 6 foot, and the house is 25 feet tall. It's 40 feet from where you're getting to get to the other side. Like that's going to be a series of things that you're going to have to do. You can't just jump over just because that's, even though we're living in a place with like magic and dragons and whatever, like there's a limit to like you're just some guy.
We're not all like omnipotent, omniscient,
yeah.
all powerful beings.
Yeah. So you've got to I'll be willing to get you there and do what you're wanting to do, but it's not going to happen. Like I'm going to have you like climb one side and then leap over this, and then there's stuff involved. But
the other thing I would say is be okay with being like if you're not a DM and you're playing as a character, be okay with vulnerability. Be willing to put yourself in a harm's way and be okay with that, or to embrace the weaknesses that your character has, because that actually makes it more fun. Two of the characters, like in our campaign, in the very first session, had a moment where one of the characters went to 0 HP, and the other character went and helped them, and it wasn't even anything other than the motivation of the character that did the helping was, it was me. I just want to go get a drink, but I don't want questions asked about somebody dying on this field, so that's going to stop me from drinking. But that formed a bond, right? And like at the same time, you can kind of see that play out in the way that your encounters in the world happen. So you might see characters that acknowledge things that have happened, that things that you've done, things that have happened to you, as opposed to just saying, I'm mad that I can't just brute force my way through the game or whatever. It's okay that you can't do everything. You can't like convince everybody to do your bidding and just hit everybody one time and they fall down, or throw spells all around.
well, you're still living in a society of rules and laws and things that have been set up to protect the common folk. Which, if you're playing a character in this, you're not a common person. Like you've been, anointed by, fate or destiny or whatever to go and do a thing somewhere.
Or maybe you. I think there are some sessions where your character is very short-lived, and maybe that's the beauty of it. Like, you walk in, you do a couple of things, and then somebody hits you in the head, and you're dead. And if you have permadeath, then that character lasted for one session. But you record what they did, and either you create a new character or whatever. But if every single roll was a 20, the game would be boring.
Yeah. And sometimes when you have something that somebody wants to do, or somebody tries to do something and it works, and it was harebrained, and it worked, you're like, wow, remember that time that we did this?
Yeah.
But even then, like sometimes the opposite is equally as entertaining or more entertaining. I was like, hey, remember when we tried to do that and we failed miserably? Like we tried to use, a rope to swing over this ledge and, throw it back to each other or whatever. And the very first person that took along, like they swung, the rope broke, and then they just fell, and then they like kind of did that Bugs Bunny down the hill kind of a thing and tumbled. They're not dead, but it was a major setback. And we all laughed about it and had a good time. And that's what the whole game is about, is just like telling a story, of adventure with your friends without really having to leave the house at all.
I'm not going to explain much of this, but my character had a run where all I wanted to do was cast Sacred Flame because it's a cantrip. Doesn't cost me anything, but I have a spell DC of 14. And a dexterity check against that. Is it a dexterity check?
Yeah, it's a dexterity check for Sacred Flame.
Is like very easy, especially if you get bad rolls from your enemies.
Yeah.
And there was a run of time where it was like Sacred Flame, it does nothing. Yeah. Sacred Flame, it does nothing. But then when Sacred Flame does do something cool, like much later, like maybe I think I gave up on using it for a while.
Well, like as you've grown and leveled, like you're finding like new stuff. I'm like, I can hit somebody with this. I'm like, okay, so then you start using the other stuff.
But if I, in the moment that you do pull it out and it does like, this did the thing that you wanted it to do and it killed a guy, you're like, oh, all right, cool, the bad guy's dead. As opposed to like every single time, I'm gonna do, 2d6 of damage every single time. It's kind of boring.
Yeah.
So, and it also makes you appreciate your turns. It's not just like button mashing in a video game where it's like I'm just swinging my sword, and if I miss 3 times, but I hit you 50 times because I mashed the button.
Yeah, because you just kept swinging.
Yeah, you don't
and
even
there's
know
no
when
penalty
you miss.
for continuing the swing. Yeah.
And turns come at a premium because I'm going to do my action, then I'm going to do my bonus action, and then I'm going to do my movement. Maybe not in that order. But then I'm sitting there, and there are 7, like in the last session we had, there are 4 people on the outskirts just shooting at you every single time you finish a turn. If you did nothing, you're like, oh, crap.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys were surrounded. Like, as a little insight, was like, basically the undead rose up around you, and like you had some people... Some monsters that were right up in your face, but you also had some archers that were on the outskirts just kind of firing in. And, you needed to handle everything, like either quickly or what. But it was intense. But spoiler, like everyone made it out victorious, but like you went down a couple times.
Yeah.
And like, you guys had just recently been shopping and bought a bunch of potions, and I think
they're all gone.
I think a number of you are out. So
they're all jacked. Peace out. But it makes you appreciate it more, and then you also start seeing that like once you get rid of the strongest, like you start. I think we started with some of the stronger.
You guys did start with the strong. You did start attacking some of the stronger guys, which is one way of thinking it. You get rid of the like. Heavy attackers that hit heavy and have like special abilities, and then you just have to worry about like the little ones that have like one attack and it's a basic, it's a bow or a club or whatever, and then it's like, okay, we can mop up. But the other way of thinking about that is like get rid of those little guys first, because all they're doing is pissing you off.
Yeah. Clear
the little guys, and then you can everyone can kind of like turn and like hammer the big guy. So
you never like when we had. And this is kind of narration. It's anecdotal. It could go either way. But in that, this was in our last session. While the stronger nuclear in the center enemies we were engaged with them, there were 4 undead enemies on the outside that kept firing, and every single shot of theirs seemed to hit.
Yeah, for a bit. It was towards the end where it was like everyone started to break up. Then they were missing a little bit. So, but
once the big guys went down,
that's the dice too. The dice were rolling really well for me, and that whole thing when I was rolling stuff, everyone was rolling really well in the beginning, and like once some of the bigger guys in the middle started falling down, And I was like, oh, these arrow guys are not hitting anymore. Like I'm like, oh, that's a 3. Like
Yep.
it's not. That's not.
Blink.
Yeah, you could have caught that. That one's moving so slow. You could have caught it out of the air.
Oh, I should have tried that. See, but that's
That's
thing
actually
to
a
think.
monk ability. Monks actually get that ability called missile snare. So.
Oh well, there you go. So,
So-
that's something to maybe try in another character or something. But yeah. So I think the main point is, if you've seen a YouTube video, or you've heard of, you have friends that have played D&D, or you used to play D&D and you hear a lot about it now. Don't be intimidated by going back into it. Some of the pitfalls that we've had is for us, everybody in our group has day jobs, very daunting ones. We work a lot of hours, so sometimes it's difficult for us to get time to get a session in. But
Yeah. And then you also have everyone's lives around you, like people are getting married or taking vacation, or like they've got like what was it, he had like a job thing he had to go to out of state, like he had a assignment for a job fair or symposium or
some stuff.
they had to go to, and or like some people like have like they're on call, like like they come home, and then like if it's something goes bad at work, they get a phone call. So like in the middle of what we're doing, we have to take a pause for someone that has to take a phone call from work, and you got to do what you got to do.
And I mean, and that's okay, because
It happens, and if you're all friends, you can all kind of understand and get beyond behind that. But
I think the point is that it's different from when you see people, like if you actually play it, it's different from when you see people live streaming it, where they,
they're getting paid sometimes.
in some cases that's their livelihood, which is fine, and they're very entertaining at it. You're not gonna have a punchline every 10 minutes, when you play. You're just gonna have fun. So if you have to pause every little bit, you can. If it takes you a few weeks before you have another session, that's cool too. You're not going to have like 5 hours of uninterrupted playtime with a perfect narrator in the background saying, "Okay, and now this happens," and an audience watching you. So it is fun. It improves social interaction. If you do reach out to people that you don't know, like if you go to, obviously you want to do it safely, but you never know. You can meet some really cool people that share like interests to you, especially because D&D is so customizable, I guess is the term.
You can get it to fit into a lot of different scenarios. So like I've seen people take the exact same rule set and just skin it with something else. Like, oh, we're gonna like what I'm doing with it is basic for Christmas is I'm basically skinning, a bunch of stuff over with that D&D has with Santa's workshop and whatever. Like there's just a wrapping. You just call it something else, or you name it something else, or whatever, and you can do whatever you need to do.
So if there's a fringe type IP, some sci-fi thing that you're into, or whatever, some sort of thing that you like that you think, hey, nobody else likes, go to a spot and see if you might find like the other 5 people in the world that are, or the
He's
in
like,
the
yeah,
50
we're gonna.
mile radius that love that thing, and now you have people you could talk about it with, and
And then you just go through the game and okay, well, we're gonna put this in space. So all like ships are actually spaceships. Crossbows are, blasters, and short swords and daggers are like laser swords and whatever. Like you just wrap whatever you want to wrap around it. So
yeah, perfect.
the precedent though is that like if you've ever watched anything on TV or YouTube or Twitch or whatever of these people playing this game, don't expect to like walk in and it magically work like that. There's people that are like, that is, they're getting paid for that. It's their job, they're there to host a show. They're trying to, they have production value and like, assistants. Like they're sitting at a table and someone brings them a coffee who's not involved in the game because they're like an assistant or they're an intern or whatever, and they're bringing them other stuff. Like, somebody's out there, and like, as far as for like big names out there, like Joe Manganiello, who's married to Sofia Vergara, like he's got a Dungeons and Dragons cave. Like he has a basement that was basically a wine cellar that he's now turned, and it's covered in like books and miniatures and a table where him and his friends come and play. But like he's played live on TV with a number of different shows, and like it's very all well done and production value with lighting and all. It's not going to be like that.
No.
You know, some guy who's hanging out in a game store wanting to do stuff is not, Charles Dickens or J.R.R. Tolkien or George R.R. Martin or whatever. They're not writing the next American, fantasy novel or whatever. Like, sometimes, they just want to run a module that someone put out in the book, and like they're doing it the best they can. And, that's good. Not everyone's going to have character voices and painted miniatures and, foam terrain that's built to scale. And, like, sometimes it's just go and, like, you sit and talk. Like, not our last game, but the game before. Our game, the session before, was basically a quest turn in and a shopping trip. There were no miniatures.
It was like a good 3 hours of...
Yeah, it was a good 3 hours of talking and getting backstory and finding out what you're going to do and talking to guards and talking to, military personnel and talking to, priests and mages and trying to figure out what's going on and everything. Like, but, I mean, you need some of that. Like, different games go for different things. Sometimes
I will say some of the most enjoyable moments to me are when we're in town and I'm like, I would like to get that thing, and then you hand me a card, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, ooh, this thing does what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to get to slice some stuff up.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool, because in reality, again, just like in real life, you get something, like in that session that Adam's talking about, I got a sword that is arcane and has all this cool stuff. But in actual use, if you roll a die and it doesn't do the thing, then it's useless. It doesn't do anything. So the you're always going to have more fun reading the card and going, wow, I could potentially do all this stuff with it. And maybe it eventually will reach that potential. But, there's always the physics of the game that's going to, so for me, getting a thing and getting loot and looking at new equipment is always a ton of fun.
Yeah. But some people want to have like a big, long, complicated story arc with very, political interactions, Star Wars episodes 1, 2, and 3, where lots of stuff are happening in the Senate and there's travel and like intrigue and whatever.
We're going into that in another episode.
But like other people want the like Diablo kill shit get loot kind of stuff where like you go into a dungeon and then like there's like, oh, there's this many rooms and I know there's this many monsters and like at the end I get a chest full of fun, interesting stuff. And then they go through and do that, and then once they're done, they're like, all right, see you next week, and they're out. Like they could very well be playing the same character and they just put a different color skin on it, and then like, oh, that's the next campaign is like it's the same guy, but like instead of being a human, he's an orc or he's a elf or dwarf or whatever. But he's just like, I like to have a big axe and I like to hit stuff really hard and it dies, and that's the way they want to play their game, and that's fine.
Yeah,
go in, but like when. And this is the other thing, is like when you're joining a game, it's important to like kind of, before you sit down at the table with everyone and something's in progress, it's referred to as a session 0, where it's like, you meet beforehand, you kind of talk about what the game's going to be like, what's expected of everyone, kind of lay some ground rules, see if you get to like grab some snacks, see what everyone's like or how everyone interacts and if you all get along, and then if you do, great, then the game can continue. But not everyone's going to get along. Sometimes you have to ask people to leave a game. Sometimes, it gets difficult, dealing with, some person who's just not willing to participate or, causes, gets in fights with people at the table or whatever. Like sometimes, hey, we're here for us all to have a good time.
Especially if you're dealing with people you don't know.
Yeah, especially like random new people. Like you have to get to know and trust and enjoy people. The same way, like if you're out adventuring and you find a guy tied to a tree and they're like, hey, come on our adventuring party. And then, like, oh, like in the middle of the night, he stole all of our stuff and hightailed it. Like, oh, that was a bad choice to bring him into our group and let him take watch. Like,
Don't pick up hitchhikers.
yeah, well, I mean, sometimes you have to vet them. We're like, it's like, look, there was a reason you were tied to that tree. So, well, like, we're going to take watch. You're going to sleep, but you're going to be tied up. So,
Yeah.
it's just, we don't trust you yet.
Overall, I think the main point is don't be intimidated by D&D. I mean, obviously, approach it realistically, but it can be a ton of fun, and it's not that hard to get into. It's pretty easy to learn, and there is no really like mastering it. Like they say some games are, you can pick it up right away, but it takes a lifetime to master. D&D is not one of those things. D&D is something that you're consistently learning, consistently experiencing, and you get out of it what you put into it.
Yeah, especially because, like, on my side, like, I feel that, like, I've learned a lot of rules, but then someone will ask me, like, well, if I want to do this, how do I do it? I'm like, well, let me see if there's anything referencing that in the book, and then I have to go and learn something. So, because the human imagination can put so much out there, giving the information that it's got, it might ask you to do something wacky, but that's okay, because it could turn out being a really great time.
Awesome. So I think that wraps it up for this session. If you guys have any questions, comments, feel free to send them our way, especially around D&D. We're both pretty passionate about the game. We have a lot of fun doing it. So we really think that more people, even though it's super popular, we really think more people should give it a shot.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, I'm be happy to answer some. Also, as far as a poll, like, would you like to hear one of our sessions recorded or not? That might be interesting.
Yeah, session recorded or a narration of a previous session.
Yeah, I'm basically
or both.
building a book of all this. Every time we have a session, I write a couple paragraphs of how the session went
For $59.99. No, just kidding. But yeah,
that's when we get an illustrator and someone to spell check it and edit it and then bind it and then maybe we'll sell it on a shop or something somewhere.
Awesome. All right, so until next time, this has been the End of a Species podcast, talking D&D, and we'll see you on our next episode.